I wouldn't even be doing this. I'd be at some beautiful place with a gorgeous ocean.
Look, they're all pointing.
The Atlantic, maybe the Pacific.
Yeah, someone's on top of the roof. Look. There he is right there. Right there, see him? He's laying down. You see him?
Yeah, he's laying down.
And still I'm here with you fighting like hell to get a senator.
What's happening?
And to make sure we take back the White House, because if we do, we're going to make America better than ever before. We're going to make it.
Yeah, look.
And it's
There he
not
is.
easy, because we have millions and millions of people in our country that shouldn't be here. Dangerous people, criminals. We have criminals. We have drug dealers. We have people that should not be here. And it's much tougher than if it happened. We have the strongest border ever. In recorded history, we're the best border. In fact, if they could ever put up a chart, I don't know if they can do it. Do you guys have access to that chart that I love so much? You don't mind if I go off teleprompter, do you? Because these teleprompters are so damn boring, I try and explain that. Oh, there's it. Wow. You guys are doing it. They're getting better with time. My guys, take a look at that chart. Take a look at the arrow on the bottom. See the big red arrow, right? So that's when I left office. That was the lowest point, and that comes right from the government services, comes right out of Border Patrol. Take a look at that. So that arrow is the lowest amount of illegal immigration ever in recorded history into our country. And then the worst president in the history of our country took over. And look what happened to our country. Probably 20 million people. And you know, that's a little bit over that chart. That chart's a couple of months old, and if you want to really see something that says, what happened.
Could it be that the United States Secret Service is truly this incompetent? Or are they just this corrupt? Live from the studio, I'm Jimmy Selesky.
Perfect.
Now, I'm not going to say definitively that this was absolutely a planned operation, but I will say I almost hope it was. Because if it wasn't, then we have a real problem on our hands. See, at least if there was an element of corruption in here, we could locate the problem, identify the culprits, remove them from the agency, and know that we have a strong agency. If it turns out that along every step of the way, they are that bad at their job, then that's probably evidence of just how bad every agency is at their job. And you'll hear a lot of different reasonings for how this happened, why this happened. None of them make sense. I'm not a Secret Service agent myself, but I find it very difficult to comprehend how the literal nearest building to the speech, to Donald Trump, outside of the buildings that the Secret Service snipers are occupying themselves, as we'll see in this aerial map, this building, 1 story tall, was less than 450 feet away from Donald Trump. That's less than 150 yards. That's about a football field and a half. Not even. I'm no gun expert, but I happen to know that a 150-yard shot is very makeable, even for a normal shooter, particularly with scopes and technology that we have available. The idea that the Secret Service would have not classified this building at this distance as something that should be locked down and secured is unfathomable by every possible metric and every possible common sense line of thought.
The shooter was about 150 yards away, well within the usual Secret Service perimeter, which according to former Secret Service Director Julia Pearson is 1,000 yards.
It does simply not work into the equation. You'll hear them say, well, the Secret Service actually worked hand in hand with the local law enforcement and deferred the security of those buildings to the local police. Why? This is your literal job. I can understand if you want to defer some of the lower tier responsibilities that don't involve securing key positions and rooftops of buildings that provide not only a clear line of fire, a clear shot to the president, but are also within a perfectly workable range for any moderately proficient shooter. It seems obvious that those positions would be handled by the people that are trained to handle them, not the local police who spent all last week racking up DUIs and disorderly conducts in Butler, Pennsylvania, and are now tasked with securing high-risk security points in protection of the former president of the United States. That doesn't make sense. It's not an excuse. You know what else doesn't make sense? I understand that perhaps when authorities, be it the Secret Service or just the regular police, identify a potential threat, that you don't want to immediately start blasting. You don't want to see a guy on a roof holding what appears to be a rifle, blow his brains out, and then find out he was just holding, I don't know, a telescope or something. I can understand that line of thought. Kind of. I also kind of don't. There are certain things you just do not do. And if you do them, you should probably not be surprised if you find yourself shot. Bear crawling on the roof of a building and aiming a gun-like object at the president is one of those things. And no, I do not believe that you should be given one free shot before you yourself are shot. That seems very dumb. I'm not saying that is definitely the policy. Apparently it is, though. It may not be the policy on paper, but it was certainly the policy in practice. I'm not pawning off any responsibility to the sniper in particular or any other individual involved. Apparently there was a local policeman who actually encountered the shooter on the roof. The shooter turned around with a rifle, at which point the officer retreated down the ladder again.
The minute that local law enforcement, who apparently had a rifle pointed on, there should have been an emergency frequent comms channel that they could have said, we have a shooter on the roof, shooter on the roof. Secret Service should have rushed the stage and immediately took the president and took him off and then responded with the counter sniper. The shot should not have gone off. That is the failure in itself. You're supposed to be able to try, the best security is when you go in and you're actually able to prevent an incident, not react to an incident. Bottom line is that this is massive negligence to the point of me speculating on what was intentional and what wasn't.
I will allow, for the sake of this next example, that maybe it is normal to give those jobs to local policemen and the SWAT teams in those areas who, again, are not trained specifically for this matter. This is not their job. If it was their job, they would be called the Secret Service. Notice how they're not. But okay, this is just what we do. Jim, you're wrong. There's nothing that we can possibly point out that might be a hole in that system. So okay, you got me. Totally acceptable practice. Boom. Love it. And also, while we're at it, Jim, you crazy conspiracy theorist, me, it is also totally common practice, and we also see no potential harm or backfire in basically refusing to eliminate a potential threat to the president until that potential threat has explicitly shown him or herself to be a deadly threat, which may or may not involve firing off a round at the head of the president, blowing his brains out, at which point you have clearly identified yourself as a threat, you have crossed the line, mister. That is the last straw. You just killed the president? Oh, buddy. So, okay, that makes sense too, that I guess we do that. Again, maybe not on paper. Maybe that's not what's supposed to happen, but that's what happened. Something is stupid about this situation. Almost too stupid. Because again, let's allow for that as well. That's just the way it went. That's just the way it goes. Okay, why don't you at least have the president, former president, step down off the stage, get out of the line of fire, potential line of fire, until we identify what exactly it is that we're looking at on this roof with what appears to be a rifle aimed at the president. I understand, maybe, that you don't want to shoot a person who is not actually holding a gun. And you want to make sure that you've clearly determined that that's what this is. But why not, at the very least, get the president out of harm's way? Maybe have him duck down before he gets shot in the ear. Is that insane? Look, I clearly don't have any security training, but I would have to imagine that if there is a very reasonable suspicion among the crowd and local authorities and the Secret Service themselves that the president is currently standing directly in the sights of a potential shooter, that perhaps a bare minimum protocol would be to remove him from the sights of a potential shooter. Identify this as either a threat or a non-threat, and then proceed with the rally. I don't understand how that doesn't happen. The level of incompetence that is being asked of me to accept is borderline too tall of an order. When you stack all the things I just said together, it is almost unimaginable how stupid someone would have to be to have allowed all of these events to transpire the way they did. I do not want to be blamed for speculating that there is at the very least a possibility that something that seems so unbelievably stupid and unlikely to have slipped through the cracks may have otherwise been facilitated or encouraged in one way or another. I'm not here to speculate as to exactly what that may be. We know that these agencies such as the Secret Service, the FBI, the CIA, are full of unelected people whose primary concern at this point, like all bureaucrats, is self-preservation. We know that these agencies answer and serve the Biden administration ultimately. We know that the administration that they serve is the same administration who has targeted Donald Trump legally, breaking every law to do so. And therefore, it's not incredibly difficult for me to believe that this same administration may have targeted him lethally. And I recognize that this, of course, would be the first person in history that the United States government is responsible for killing. I know that this would be a monumentally new thing for the country of the United States of America. For the CIA or the FBI or someone in the deep trenches of political power would have possibly orchestrated the death of someone that opposes their agenda. I know this is a crazy idea. I know that we've absolutely never seen agencies such as the FBI radicalize, encourage, instigate, and incite people to commit these types of acts, target people that are easily impressionable, and radicalize them and incite them to a point to commit these acts. I know we've never seen that happen. So it's insane for me to speculate that that could possibly be the thing now. No, what we are allowed to believe, guys, is that no matter how crazy this gets, you are not allowed to assume that it might be crazier. No matter where we get on the crazy scale, if you speculate that in any way there might be a little bit more to it than even that, you are crazy. Now, of course, when it goes up beyond that next week or next month with something even crazier, then you're allowed to occupy that in your brain as reality. But again, not one step further than that. What we are allowed to believe now is that all of these things are coincidentally happening at the same time. And one final note on the Secret Service. And I hate to say this. I know this isn't my most intellectual point today, but what's with all the chicks? Seriously, I'm not really joking. I have no problem with women occupying certain positions. I do if it becomes abundantly clear that this is not as a result of their qualifications or merit, but rather as an effort to fill out some type of quota or stated diversity purpose within the agency, such as the Secret Service. When you're looking at this Cheeto lady who is the head of the agency, and then you look at the other person in this video.
So my role in the Secret Service is the RNC coordinator, so that is my purview. Any questions regarding yesterday's event can be directed to our public affairs office out of DC.
And then you see this USA Today interview with this former Secret Service agent.
Let's bring to the conversation Evie Pompouras. She's a former Secret Service agent. Evie, good morning.
And I can't help but think, is this an accurate representation of the proportion of females to males that are interested in joining the Secret Service? Is this an accurate representation of the field of applicants that are able to fulfill whatever qualifications, physical, mental, obviously mental is one thing, but I'm talking about the physical qualifications. Look, not every job needs to have physical qualifications. Not every job should require you to be a certain height or a certain build or a certain level of strength or a certain proficiency with firing a weapon or an ability to handle a violent or potentially fatal altercation. Not every job requires that. This is not a requirement at most jobs, actually. It does actually happen to be a requirement of the Secret Service, the agency responsible for the protection of the president. It actually happens to be a very obviously so requirement in that field. And I find it very hard to believe, especially when you have videos that explicitly state an initiative to bring in 30% female recruits into the agency.
To expand hiring, they're aiming to have 30% women recruits by 2030, and even allowed YouTube influencer Michelle Carre to train with agents.
But I'm very conscious, as I sit in this chair now, of making sure that we need to attract diverse candidates and ensure that we are developing and giving opportunities to everybody in our workforce, and particularly women.
Perhaps we are potentially valuing diversity quotas over proficiency. Again, I would understand if there was a handful of women in the Secret Service. But I'm just a regular guy. I've gone out to bars. You don't tend to see too many chicks as bouncers at bars even, where their job is to like make sure nobody gets in a fist fight or bug a bartender, much less be in charge of the security of the president. Security does not seem to be a primary field. It's not up there at the top for what women generally pursue. It's not. It makes sense why it's not. It's not really a line of pursuit for me either. You know, if I'm being honest, it's not. It tends to be mostly men and mostly a certain type of man. Usually a big, strong, alpha guy. That's usually who you want in charge of handling potentially violent or lethal situations. I'm looking at all these interviews, and it's becoming increasingly harder and harder to believe that it's merely a coincidence. It makes you think that perhaps they're not there because they're the most qualified. They're there because they check a box. And we see time and time again that the logical conclusion of prioritizing diversity and inclusion over actual qualifications and proficiency results in the degradation of that industry. I'm sorry to say, that should not be overlooked. Everyone in the Secret Service who is occupying a hands-on position, meaning boots on the ground, should be able to kick my ass. I think that's fair. I'm not saying I'm the heavyweight champion of the world. In fact, that's my point. I'm not the heavyweight champion of the world. I'm a slightly bigger than average dude with some high school wrestling experience, some boxing when I was a kid. You should be able to handle a decently sizable, slightly above average threat if your job is to protect the president. If you can't, you should be doing something else. How about this one? Maybe if part of your job requires standing in front of the president to block any potential fire, you should be within 1 foot of the height of the president. Maybe you shouldn't be a 5'2" woman standing in front of the president to block any fire when the president himself is over 6 feet tall. That seems to make sense to me too. You would think, again, that any of this would be factored in to the equation. But amazingly, it's not. Now, I'm not saying that people in the office positions and the, policy positions, I'm not saying that everybody in the Secret Service has to be a big, tall, young man. Obviously, the higher ups, graduate past that. But when you lower the bar in that field, the recruit field, for the boots on the ground, to emphasize diversity and representation over qualification, then it's going to naturally draw some doubt into the qualifications of people occupying other positions within the company. People are going to then wonder, well, if we're seeing a bunch of out-of-shape women holstering guns and being directly responsible for the physical safety of the president, is there a chance that maybe some of the people in the other positions are also not necessarily the most qualified for the job? Not a crazy question if you ask me. And this goes back to the overarching question, which is this what we saw over the weekend a result of incompetence or corruption? Was this planned or just a very happy accident? Because let me tell you one thing, at the very least, if Trump was taken out, ain't nobody in the Biden camp, ain't nobody in the Democrat camp was going to be sad about that. In fact, like I said before, Biden and a lot of people in this country are sad he missed. That is an unfortunate yet very true reality. But sometimes incompetence itself is part of the corruption. Incompetence is baked into the cake. It's what makes a lot of these other things possible. The reason why when you look at most major cities and you see someone occupying the position of mayor, as we've discussed in the past, who is incredibly incompetent, you must note that that is on purpose. Because what the people in those cities, the party that has a monopoly, aka the Democrats, over virtually every major city in the country, Democrat run, they are able to install an incredibly incompetent company person who knows how to do nothing other than say what they're told to say and do what they're told to do, sign the bills and initiatives that they're told to sign, and just institute every policy that the party wants to institute. They don't want somebody who's going to challenge that. They don't want somebody who's going to go their own way. They want somebody who's going to do what they're told. So you want somebody who's incompetent because that allows you to have your way with the situation. In the context of these agencies, such as the Secret Service, it doesn't even necessarily require that anybody within the Secret Service was in on the operation if this was an orchestrated assassination attempt. It doesn't actually require that. As long as you've ensured that the people that are occupying the decision-making positions in that agency are incompetent, then it allows for the other nefarious acting agencies, such as the FBI or the CIA or whoever, to basically work around them. We're going to go out and hypothetically, let's say, radicalize some disturbed youth, encourage him to try to kill the president, just like we encouraged those guys to try to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan. Just like there were obviously people inciting things at January 6th. This happens all the time, everywhere. And because we know that the agency that's responsible for protecting the president or making sure that this kid doesn't slip through the cracks is so incredibly incompetent at their job, and they've also deputized the local police force, who is arguably even less competent at this particular line of duty, we can ensure that this kid is going to get a good shot. So when I say that it is either incompetence or corruption, that's what I mean. Our institutions have been systematically weakened. Folks, thanks for tuning in. My name is Jimmy Selesky. Till next time, peace.